thank you for joining me. I am going to be showing you today how to make our kit for kids. So you'll find when you get your kit delivered, a basket that we have preset with some wet floral foam. And you'll also receive a bucket. And the bucket has all of your flowers in it. They are cut and hydrated in the water. The floral foam is going to come wet, but there will not be a lot of water around it in the actual liner. This way it's not messy on delivery. So when you receive your basket, you want to go ahead and add a little bit of water to the liner, being careful not to let the water go in between the liner and the basket, because then that will wet the basket and make a mess. And once the basket gets wet, it could leave marks on furniture, etc. So you want to make sure that you're watering into the liner. Moving forward, in order to keep your flowers watered, you're going to put your finger down into the liner while you're watering so you can feel the level of the water rising, and that way you don't overwater your flowers as well. So in your bucket, you're going to find flowers and greens. The first thing that we're going to start with is the greenery. We're going to build up a foundation for our flowers to sit on. The first green we're going to use is called Baker Fern or Leatherleaf, and it is going to look like this in your bucket. So separate that out first. You should have 5 stems. Now with this, we're going to start by covering the floral foam and coming out from the center of our floral foam in sort of a radial fashion, like spokes on a wheel. The goal is to cover the basket so you don't see any of the mechanics, and also to create a background for your flowers to sit in front of. So you see this piece, it's a full piece, the long stem. You cut it here and put it in. You can see it's way too long, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to use it in pieces. What's easiest for us usually, and sometimes it comes really big, sometimes it comes really small. So depending on what your stem looks like, you might have to separate it a little bit more, or you might be able to use it as is. I'm going to take these bottom ones off, like so. I'm going to save them over here, and maybe 2 more. Save these for later. So I have a piece about this long. So this is probably about 5 to 6 inches long, and this is what we're going to start with. So you want to cut on an angle, like so, and you want to have about 1.5 inches of clean stem on the bottom. That's what we're going to insert into the floral foam. When you cut it on an angle, it does help the stem drink more water, because there is more exposed surface area for the stem to drink up the water from the foam. But also it helps you push it into the foam by creating this little point. So cut your stems on an angle, and go ahead and press it into the floral foam. Now I put mine in sort of going at an angle like this. You'll find that you won't be able to put it directly in at a horizontal because the foam is sitting slightly below the lip of the liner. So you want to kind of put it in going down at an angle so that it comes out and comes over the edge of your basket. I'm going to continue to do this with my other pieces, trimming them. So I have a top piece here that I'm going to use, and I just cut this like this instead of taking them off individually. You can use these pieces too, so just keep them over here in your pile of extras. And this one I'm going to put in next to the other, turning it slightly so it's not sitting directly on top of it. You don't want it to look like sheets of paper laying on top of each other. You want a little bit of dimension. So you can turn them little different ways to create a little bit of movement in your greens here. And then move on and do my next one. Again, cutting this bottom part off about 1.5 inches of clean stem, and then I'm going in this one. So if I show you from the top, you can see I started 1, 2, 3. I'm going around like the spokes on a wheel. If you have a really large stem and you want to separate into a couple more pieces, you can absolutely do that. So this one I'll have this piece here. Got my little piece, looks kind of like a mustache here. I'm gonna go in, again, working my way around the basket, saving all of my little pieces for later. Again, this one's nice and long, so I'm gonna take this off here. Now, if you're working with your child or a child, we really just have to be careful, you know, with their hands and using clippers or scissors. A lot of these stems are pretty soft, so normal scissors will work with it. If you have scissors fit to your child's hand, For the thinner stems like this, they could totally use those to cut the stems. You might need something a little bit more heavy duty for some of them. Kitchen scissors actually work fine, but you just want to keep an eye on them to make sure that they don't cut themselves. My daughter, when we did this kit together, she just used a little pair of scissors to cut most of the pieces. And I'll give you suggestions on how to break them down for the kids to use as we go. All right, so I'm gonna put this one in like so. And of course, as you go, take off any little pieces that are broken or damaged. So now you can see it's all coming out, almost kind of looks like a star coming out from the center, right? All this way. And then we're gonna use all these extra little pieces that are left over to come in between and hide all of this foam in any places where you can see underneath. So these little mustachy looking pieces, you can just go ahead and stick them right in the middle if you like. That's gonna cover all that foam for us, which is nice. And all these little pieces like this, you just wanna clean, again, the little bottom leaves off the bottom, so you just have enough to put into the Oasis. Always give it a fresh cut before it goes in. That way it'll drink up the most water. And just come in underneath. Like these don't have to stick out far, they're more for coverage. So these are just kind of like filling in, building up. Anything that might look a little bit long, you can push into the Oasis a little bit further. If you find that it's still too long, you can remove it, recut your stem, and place it back in. Don't place it back in the same hole though, because you'll find that then it just wants to pull right out. You really need to find a fresh spot to stick it into the floral foam. That is one of the tricky things with the floral foam. The more you put stuff in and take stuff out, and put stuff in and take stuff out, the more it sort of degrades the texture of the foam and becomes more difficult to put the stems in. So you want to try to put your stem in and leave it alone if you can. Certainly you can take things out and reposition them when you need to, but just kind of be a little more mindful when you're putting it into the foam so that you don't have to take them out and put them back in so much. Keep the consistency of the foam more solid. Okay. So the second piece that I'm going to put in here is the Salal, which is kind of a weird name. It's the other green in your bucket, and it's also called lemon leaf, so that's probably the easier thing to say, so you can just call it a lemon leaf. And this has a broader leaf. I'm going to separate the second out of your bucket. I'll show you here. And it looks like this. You should have about 5 stems of this as well. You might not need all of it. Some of it's kind of branchy. If it is branchy, you're going to break that down into smaller pieces. This is a good place to have the kids help too. A lot of times with my daughter, what I'll do is I'll break the pieces all apart into smaller pieces, and then I'll let her cut them and put them into the Oasis or the floral foam. So this is really just kind of another green to give a little bit more, visual texture, dimension to our foliage. It's also nice because it kind of has a similar shape and color and pattern to some of the other flowers in the arrangement, so it goes really nicely with it. So we're gonna do the same thing with these. Break them down. If you have big branchy pieces, break them into individual pieces, and then you're really only gonna probably use the top 2 or 3 leaves on each one. So you just want to put that in. You can see I went kind of right in between my Baker fern, just to find a space. You want to see this a little bit. Like, this is a pretty green. You want to see it in your flowers, so it doesn't have to go all the way down in. Let it stick out a little bit. A lot of these branches are going to be kind of craggy like this, so anything you can do to clean up that stem before it goes into the floral foam is helpful. If there are any little knobs, you want to pick those off or trim them off with your clippers or kitchen scissors. And then just add this kind of into taste, as much or as little as you want. Anything that you don't use, hold off to the side. You might want to add it in later. I can see there's a couple of spaces where you can still sort of see the foam, or you can kind of see down into the basket, and I want to cover that. So that is the #1 place to put it. And then after that, just kind of where I want to see it. Just trim those little pieces off. Again, leaving about 1.5 inches of stem to go in. And then I'm just working it in between the Baker fern, just to give it a little bit more texture. These. Like so. Okay, then we're gonna get into our flowers. So let's see. And here we have our alstroemeria. It's going to be nice, like pink color, and our carnations. And you'll get 2 colors of carnations, 3 of one color and 3 of another. I'm pulling these out first because they're the largest things that are going to go in. And when you're designing, sometimes it's easiest to start with the larger ones because that kind of like makes the shape and sets the whole thing together before you start putting in the smaller pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my Alstroemeria. Alstroemeria is nice, long-lasting. So you just want to clean off any of the leaves that are broken. If there are pretty leaves still on there, just leave those because they'll just kind of work in with the rest of the foliage and make it look a bit fuller. And you have 3 of these. So this one, I'm going to leave my stem a little bit longer so I have a little bit more wiggle room with where I want to place them. And we're going to put these in a triangle formation. So when you're looking from the top, you want 1, 2, 3 in a triangle, like so. So I'll start with this. Again, I'm putting it in, not directly up and down. I'm kind of tipping it to the outside because that's really what you're gonna see. If you're gonna put this on a table or put this on a coffee table or wherever, you're gonna be sitting a little bit lower. So you wanna make sure that everything goes all the way down to the floral foam and kind of tips out a bit because this is really the most important part. I take all 3, trim them up, and place this one in as well. And you can see I'm putting it in so it's kind of at the same level coming out of my basket as my Baker fern. And I'm just going right in between the other greens. Remember always about cutting stems at an angle. It will help you out in putting the flowers in the foam, and it will have them last a bit longer. Now, it doesn't really matter the orientation of the handle here. I did 2 on one side and 1 on the other because that's how it worked out. It doesn't work as well, obviously, to have 2 here and then 1 here because that's where the handle meets the basket, so you can't really put a flower directly there. So from above, you know, you have to kind of like go asymmetrical on it a little bit, like have 1, 2, 3, like so. So you can place them in that triangle and they can all be seen all the way around without having to put one like right where the handle hits the basket. And then with our carnations, now this is where it gets a little bit more difficult because we actually have to measure. This one, of course, we're not going to push the flower all the way down to the floral foam. So you want to kind of measure where you want it to be in your arrangement. And then you're going to cut your stem based on that measurement. And always cut a little bit long. So mine starting right now is, I would say, probably about total, maybe 10 inches, 8 inches of stem, something along those lines. Now, this is probably going to be too long, but I'm starting with a little bit long because I want to make sure that I have enough stem to put into the oasis. And also, I want to make sure that I can trim a little bit more off if I need to reposition my carnation. If you cut it way too short, you can't put the stem back on. So always remember to be a little conservative with your cutting, but measure it and cut it a little bit lower than you think. And then remember, you know, you're going to the point where the oasis is, but then you have to go about 1 inch into the oasis. So you have to measure not just to the basket, but down in about 1 inch or so, because that's how far you have to push it in. Now, the weird thing about carnations is they have these little knots kind of on their stem moving all the way up where the leaves are coming out. If you cut it right on one of those knots, they really won't drink. And also, if you cut a stem on the fattest part and try to put it into the floral foam, it makes a really big hole and then doesn't hold the stem up. So you want to make sure when you're cutting that you're not cutting it where this little knot is, you're cutting somewhere in between on the clean stem. So I'm gonna put it to my oasis and see, okay, yeah, this is too long. So I'm gonna trim it again. This I'm gonna go above the knot at an angle and try this one. Perfect. Now I'm aiming for it to be just under the handle of my basket. I want there to be enough room that you can pick it up this way, but at the same time I want it to be nice and full. I don't want to just see a bunch of handle. So I'm gonna put this on here, and I'm gonna put another one in the opposing color opposite it on the other side. So basically what we're gonna do is have 2 of our, or 3 of our carnations up kind of high, and then we're gonna do 3 down low. Again, we're gonna work in that kind of triangular pattern. So I'm gonna take this one, and I don't want it to be all the hot color on top and all the light color on the bottom, so I'm gonna mix it up and do 2 light on top and 1 of the hot pink, and then vice versa on the bottom. You can mix it how you like. So this one kind of went in between these 2, so this one's gonna go between these 2, and I want it to be about the same height. See, and that's a little bit too long, so I'm gonna trim. And there we go. Maybe poke around, find the oasis, and then just gently push it into the foam, like so. I got that one there, and then I'm gonna do my other one over here, and I'll do that one hot If your carnations come and they're a little bit tight, you can fluff them by squeezing around this little bud part here underneath and just kind of using your hand to fluff out the individual petals, and it'll make it get a little bit larger. Okay, so let's see here. Oh, yep, that's pretty good. It's about an inch higher than I want it, so you can go ahead and put that into the basket. Perfect. This is why I'm mentioning that we should do about an inch into the foam as well, is because if you push it in too far and you hit the bottom of the basket, you don't really have any place to go to adjust it. And once you pull it up out of that same hole where you put the stem, it wiggles around a lot, it doesn't really hold it. So you can always, you wanna leave it enough room that you can always push it in a little bit more. That helps with adjusting your flowers, but you really don't wanna push it all the way in there. Okay, so then this one, around the bottom more. So this one I'm trimming a little bit shorter, kind of feeling around here through the oasis. Now this one I'm putting in at more of an angle, lower, because I want to see this color down here, not up high. So I'm going to go ahead and push this in this way. Actually, it's a little bit too long, so I'll trim that. There we go. Okay. One. And then I'm putting another one here and another one here. And that way we're going to see all the color all the way through our basket. One here. Oops, see this one's actually a little bit tight, so let me show you. We're just gonna squeeze this green part at the base of the petals and then fluff with our hand. Just make it a little bit larger. It goes in right here, underneath. And then my last one is gonna go right over here. And now we have the basic shape of our arrangement. The other flowers that we have here, the daisies and the mums and the statice, can all be broken down into smaller pieces. So this is actually really good thing to have your kids help with. They can pull all of these off if you're not comfortable with them using the scissors, because we can use these all individually into our arrangement. When you get to the top, depending on how long these stems are, these are called lateral stems. They're the stems that come off from the main stem. Depending on how long they are, if they're short like this, you're not going to be able to use them as their own stem. So you maybe leave these grouped together and use this as one stem. You can break them all down that way. So you can see at the bottom of the stem, these laterals are much longer. You can use these as individual placements. And these at the top aren't so much, so I'm going to leave those all attached to the stem. You can do that with all three of them. Take the ones off the bottom, keep them in a pile, and then keep the ones at the top. So we're going to place the top ones first because they take up more space. So again, it's easier to work with the larger things first and then back into the smaller things, because the smaller ones we can put in between. So I start with this one, and this one you can see it's kind of spread out almost like a triangle on the stem. So I'm going to work it in between. There we go. So it's kind of already filling in, putting it in between my carnations. And you can even, once you have it in there, if you want to move it around the handle even, you know, to like spread it out a little bit in the arrangement, that works really well too. And take my other piece that had the three at the top. And again, I'm kind of still working in this broad triangle because again, I want to be able to see a similar, it doesn't have to be completely equal, but a similar weighting of the flowers and the colors all the way around the basket. The best way to do that is to work in the triangle so you can see it all the way through. And this one right over here. And then with these individual pieces, you can use as much or as little as you want. But each one, you're going to want to give them a fresh cut so that they have a nice angle that can go into the floral foam. And also so they can drink up the water. Now these don't have to come out to the same level. You can push these in a little bit deeper. This is the nice thing about using these smaller pieces, is they start to create a little bit of that layering that makes it look full and yeah, makes it look a little bit more natural than having everything exactly the same size coming out of your basket. So for these guys, you can really tuck them in pretty deep into your arrangement. So they're filling the space this way also. If you're looking at it going this way, you don't have to just fill around here, you gotta fill in the middle so that when you're looking through, you just don't see stems. So these are perfect for that. I use them around the bottom, kind of tuck them in behind in some of my carnations so that my arrangement's starting to get nice and full. We're going to do basically the same thing with the lavender button mums. They're the same variety of flower, just a slightly different bloom. So their stems are pretty similar. Let's save a couple of these for the end. So you can do the same thing. And again, this is a great place for the kids to help out, taking all of them off and making a nice big pile. The nice thing about these is they're very long lasting too. So if you're looking for a craft with your kids also and you have any of these left over or that were maybe too short to use in the arrangement, you can cut them off flush and they'll last a really long time. So you can use them for collaging, glue them to a ribbon to make jewelry or bracelets. We've used them here before in making corsages and stuff like that. So you know, if you take one of your leftovers and trim it off so it's nice and flat here, you just get some Elmer's school glue out. You can put that on the back and just stick it right onto a ribbon or onto a piece of cardstock and just make cool little natural collages with it or jewelry. So these are all a little bit longer, so I could probably use all of these just as laterals. So I'm gonna go ahead and take them all off. But that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you do get stems where they're very tightly clustered at the top and you're going to need to keep those probably on the stem or they won't be long enough to use. These are all a bit longer, so I'm gonna cut them all apart and I'm gonna use them in my arrangement individually. And again, you can use as much or as little as you want. So I'm gonna tuck these in here and use them around the bottom. This is the part where you kind of have to start getting down low and looking around this part as well and make sure that you have flowers tucked in underneath here. You don't want to be able to see down into that liner and make sure everything is covered. I like to put them kind of next to each other too. You know, we took them all off of the stem, but you can put them back into the arrangement to look kind of like they did on the stem, which is a little bit more natural. So you can cluster them together a little bit as well. It always looks nice. You go in between your other grouped flowers to fill in any spaces or gaps. You can use your longer ones out more so that you can see them, and then use the short ones tucked in to fill in between. Keep turning your arrangement. If you don't have a lazy Susan, that's fine. Just don't forget to turn it periodically, just look at it all the way around to make sure that your shape is still the way that you like it, and adjust your stems as you go. And now this was all from one stem, so I don't know, you might not need to use all of the blooms provided, or you certainly can, or you could always pull them off and use them in small little bud vases also to the side. If you have some little jars or anything like that lying around the house, it's always really a good way to use up your leftover blooms to fill them. So this one, I'm gonna go ahead and leave this nice and long because I wanna get one up in the middle here that's a little bit longer. None of my laterals were long enough before, so this one I'm gonna leave it with the two at the top clustered and just kind of tuck those in right here so they're more in line with the taller flowers from the beginning of the arrangement. And then I'm just gonna keep going around with all the little bits. Once you're happy with how many you have of the button mums in your arrangement, and it's nice and full, then you can move on to the status. The status is really cool too, because it kind of just dries also, so this is kind of fun to take apart. It's a really cool texture to take apart and maybe like use for collaging, or you know, if you wanted to get creative and do little like jewelry or bracelets or whatever. It's very long lasting, and since it dries, basically you don't have to worry about it dying. So I just went ahead and took the two longest lateral pieces off of the status. Sometimes they come like really leggy like this, and just separate them down into their smaller components like so. Again, just leaving the top ones clustered because I want to leave myself the decision to use them long or separate them again if I want to. Okay, leave two on here, kind of look like little booties. And this one. Okay, so now these guys have like kind of a weird stem. It's like very papery. So when you go to use them, I'm gonna use one of these pieces first. Still cut on an angle, but you want to clean some of this paper off. So this is something that kids can help with too. You know, kind of like make and then you can take your fingers and just kind of pull it off, and it cleans it down to the center part of the stem. This is going to make it easier to put it into the floral foam. Otherwise, if you just stuff it in with all of this thick papery stuff around the outside of it, it'll just make a big hole in the oasis again, and it'll start to break up the oasis, which you don't want to do. So you can use these again around the bottoms, tucked in. I kind of like them behind the other flowers a little bit, but you can make your own decisions on where you want to put them. Just making sure, again, kind of measure as you go, clean your stems off as much as possible, cut on an angle, and then you can place it into your arrangement. Keep turning the arrangement to see where there might be a hole, or maybe where it's getting flat on one side. That always kind of happens. You start designing in one direction and then the other side maybe gets flat or has a weird hole. So just keep turning it. Little short pieces you can tuck in around the bottom. That works really well to help cover the lip of the basket. I'm just going to pinch this and then just pull that paper off. Brush cut and yeah. And a piece over here. And you can just keep going with the rest of the floral material till it is as full as you like it. Again, you can stop anytime and use those other balloons elsewhere. Or just keep going until it's super duper full. Any greens that you have left over, now's a good time to kind of look through your arrangement, see if there's any places where you might want to tuck them behind, or maybe there's a space where you can see through it down to the basket. You might use just like a piece of green to tuck in there. But at this point, there should be enough stuff in there that you shouldn't really have too many places that need to be hidden. Just kind of working around and bringing out our shape so that it's nice and round, but kind of textured and pretty. Kind of like a little bit of movement, a little bit of a natural quality to it, but generally fairly round. And then you can go through too and like trim off any weird greens too, anything that might look too long, or anything that got damaged along the way. Just give it a trim. And then we are good to go with our arrangement. Oops. Okay. Spin, make sure it looks good. Now, in order to care for these, if you get them placed it where you want it to go, make sure that your liner is full of water. And again, like I mentioned earlier, put your finger down in the side so you can feel the water level before you start watering so you don't overflow your liner. And, you know, if you do happen to overflow it, just make sure it's dry and dry the bottom of your basket before placing it anywhere where it could damage a surface with water. Also, you want to keep your flowers away from any moving air, especially hot air, but even air conditioning in the summer will dry out the petals and they won't last as long. So you want to do that. And then also keep the water in here cool so that the flowers open slowly rather than quickly. And also, if you want to keep them going for as long as possible, keep them out of direct sunlight. The heat can make them expire faster, and the sunlight can make them open faster as well. So if you want to keep them for the longest possible time, these are all very long-lasting flowers, you can use those tips to make sure that they last for you for a good long time. I thank you for joining me today. Hopefully you can have fun with this with your child for a cool craft. There's lots of leftovers. You can have to make cool little bracelets or whatever. And then have this really pretty arrangement that you can display around your house, and hopefully your child can feel very proud of what they did and what they accomplished at whatever level that they are. They were able to help with the arrangement. And it's really good to, you know, as a sensory sort of, a sensory skill or a sensory activity for them too, to touch everything and smell everything. Of course, like cutting helps with fine motor skills, etc. So there's lots of little things that you can learn about and do about longevity of the flowers, talking about like colors and shapes is a really cool thing to do with your kid. So hopefully you enjoy this very much. We would love to see pictures of the work that you do. You can do so by posting on social media or by emailing the pictures to us so that we can see all the cool things that you create. And thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for watching. For more inspiration and availability, visit flowersandfancies.com or call 410-653-0600 and follow along with us on Instagram and Facebook.